She called me old compass at the dinner table, and I felt my stomach drop. That was our thing, mine and my daughter's. When she was 9 years old, I gave her a little brass compass I'd carried since my own father passed it to me. I told her it always pointed home. After that, whenever she felt lost, when she failed her driving test, when a boyfriend broke her heart sophomore year of college, she'd call me old compass. Meant she needed me to help her find the direction again. She hadn't used it in 11 years. I looked up from my plate. She was smiling at me the way you smile when someone's watching, not the way she smiled when it was just family. Her boyfriend, she'd been seeing him about 4 months, was sitting right next to her, cutting into his chicken, laughing at something my wife had said. He looked relaxed, comfortable, the kind of comfortable that takes either genuine warmth or a lot of practice. I smiled back at her and said nothing, but something moved in my chest that I hadn't felt since I worked 30 years in commercial insurance. The part of me that learned, slowly and painfully, that the moments that feel the most ordinary are sometimes the ones you need to pay the most attention to. My daughter, I'll call her Brooke, is 31. She's sharp, careful with money, the kind of person who reads the fine print and then reads it again. She works in healthcare compliance, which means she spends her professional life looking for the thing that's slightly off. I always thought that made her hard to fool. Her boyfriend, I'll call him Weston, had come into her life through a mutual friend from her college days. He was 40, maybe 42. Worked in private investment consulting, he said. Dressed well, but not flashy. Always brought something when he came over. A bottle of wine, flowers for my wife, a small thing but consistent. He asked me questions about my career and actually listened to the answers. He made my wife laugh. I liked him. That's the honest truth. I liked him before I had any reason not to. The dinner that night was a Sunday in late October. My wife had made pot roast, which meant it was a real occasion in our house. She only breaks that out for birthdays and people she's decided she wants to keep. Weston had been to the house twice before, but this was the first time my wife pulled out the good dishes. Everything felt warm, easy. Then Brooke called me old compass, and the whole room shifted for me, even though nothing changed. After dinner, Weston offered to help clear the table. That's when Brooke touched my arm and said, low enough that her voice didn't carry, "Can you come see the thing I got for the back porch? I want your opinion before I commit." We didn't have a back porch project. We both knew that. I followed her through the kitchen, past the back door, and we stood in the cold for a minute with the light from inside cutting across the dead grass. She said, "I need you to just listen and not react yet." I said, "Okay." Weston has been telling me about an investment vehicle he's been building with a couple of partners. He says it's a fixed return structured note. He's been talking about it for about 6 weeks and I kept saying I wasn't interested, and then last week he sent me a prospectus. I didn't say anything. He says the minimum entry is $40,000. He says the return is 12% annually, fixed, guaranteed by the underlying asset pool. He says the window closes in 3 weeks. I said, "Have you told him anything about what you have saved?" She was quiet for a second. I mentioned once that I'd been putting money away since I was 22. I didn't give him a number, but I said I was proud of not spending everything I made. I said, "Have you shown him anything? Bank statements, accounts, anything in writing?" "No." "Have you responded to the prospectus?" I told him I'd think about it. I said, "Has he pushed you on a specific amount?" He asked if 40 was comfortable or if I wanted to start smaller. He said I could do 25 and scale up after the first distribution. I stood there for a moment, looking at the dark yard. "What's the fund called?" "Unauthorized Capital Partners." I nodded slowly. "Okay, I want to read the prospectus. Don't respond to him tonight." She said, "I know, Dad. That's why I called you Old Compass. I want to explain something about what a guaranteed fixed return means in the current environment, because it matters for what comes next. When someone offers you a fixed return of 12% guaranteed on a structured note, one of a few things is true. Either the underlying assets are taking on enormous risk that isn't being disclosed to you, or the guarantor doesn't actually have the collateral to back the guarantee, or there is no structured note and no underlying assets, and the only money going in is yours. None of those options are good. I spent 30 years evaluating risk for a living. I am not a licensed financial advisor, and I am not telling you what to do with your money. But I know what 12% guaranteed means in a low volatility instrument. It means someone is either lying about the risk or lying about the return or lying about all of it. Brooke knew this too. That's why she called me Old Compass instead of asking me at the table. That night after Weston left, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop, and I started with the name, Unauthorized Capital Partners. There was a website, professional looking, serif font, stock photographs of mountain ranges and city skylines. It listed 3 partners by name with headshots and short bios. One of them had a name I could search. The name didn't match any SEC registration I could find. Not in their investment advisor public disclosure database. Not in FINRA broker check. Not in any state-level securities registration. That doesn't always mean fraud on its own. Not every investment vehicle requires the same registration, but an unregistered entity offering a fixed return instrument to retail investors at that yield, with that pressure timeline 3 weeks to close, that combination has a very specific name. I emailed the prospectus to a college friend of mine who went into securities law, didn't tell him why, just asked him to take a look when he had a moment. He called me the next morning before 8. He said, "Where did you get this?" I told him. He said, "This document has 3 different formatting templates in it. The letterhead font doesn't match the body font. The address on the cover page is a registered agent forwarding service in Delaware. There's a paragraph on page 7 that appears in a publicly documented fraud case from 2019, almost word for word." I said, "How bad?" He said, "The 2019 case resulted in federal charges. The person who ran that fund served 4 years. I didn't tell Brooke everything at once. I've learned over a long time that when someone has feelings for a person, the facts have to land gently or they don't land at all. If you come in with both barrels, the instinct is to defend the person you care about, not to hear what you're being told." I called her that Monday evening and I said, "I've been looking into the fund. I want to share what I found, but I also want to be straightforward with you. Some of it is not what you're going to want to hear." She was quiet. I said, "Unauthorized Capital Partners is not registered with the SEC or FINRA. The address on the prospectus leads to a mail forwarding service. My contact in securities law identified language in the document that matches a prospectus from a fraud case prosecuted in 2019. Still quiet. I said, "I'm not telling you who Weston is. I don't know who he is. I'm telling you what the document is." She said, "Could there be an explanation? Like, could they just be poorly organized, not criminal?" I said, "An unregistered fund offering guaranteed 12% returns with a closing deadline of 3 weeks, with copied language from a prior fraud case. Each of those alone might have an explanation. All of them together doesn't." She was quiet again, longer this time. Then she said, "How do I know if he's the one running it or if he got handed the same document someone handed him?" That was the right question. "That's my daughter." I said, "We don't know yet, but that question matters. The answer changes what you do next." Here is what I told her to do, and what she did. She did not tell Weston she had spoken to me. She did not tell him she had done any research. She continued the conversation as though she was still considering the investment. She asked him to walk her through the structure of the underlying assets. He explained it fluently and confidently. She asked who the custodian bank was. He gave her a name, a real bank, national institution, name everyone would recognize. She asked if she could call the bank directly to verify the account structure. He said of course and gave her a contact name and a direct number. The number went to a personal cell phone. The name the person gave did not match any employee directory at that institution. She asked Weston to send her the signed subscription agreement before she made any decision. He sent one within the hour. She asked if she could have her attorney review it before signing. He said sure, but noted that the window was closing and attorneys sometimes create delays. He said he'd see what he could do about extending her deadline as a personal favor. That phrase, as a personal favor. That's when she called me back and said, "I've heard enough." What followed was careful and deliberate. My securities lawyer friend walked her through how to file a complaint with the SEC's online tip portal, which is called the Tips, Complaints and Referrals System, TCR. She documented everything: the prospectus, the email chain, the text messages, the phone number that went to a personal cell, the subscription agreement. She did not confront Weston. She did not warn him. She did not ask him to explain himself. She submitted the complaint, forwarded all documentation, and then she stopped returning his messages. He texted once, then twice, then a third time saying he was worried she'd gotten cold feet because of outside noise. He said some people don't understand private instruments. He said he hoped she wasn't letting someone else make her decisions for her. She showed me that message and I told her she didn't need to respond. She said she knew. I want to say something about the part of this that isn't the fraud piece, because I think it's the harder part to talk about. Brooke liked him, maybe more than she'd said out loud. He'd been in her life for 4 months. He came to dinner with good wine and he made her mother laugh. He asked good questions and listened to the answers. He was the kind of person you let down your guard around. That's not nothing. Losing that is not nothing, even when you know it was built on a pretense. She told me, a few weeks after everything, that the thing she kept turning over in her head was not anger. It was embarrassment. Not the kind where you feel stupid. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong. But the kind where you realize that someone studied you, that they figured out what you needed and they gave you a version of it. That your judgment, which you trust, which you have built over 31 years of living carefully and paying attention, was being used as the instrument of the con. I told her that's exactly how these things work. The target isn't the careless person. The careless person doesn't have savings. The careless person doesn't have a track record of making good decisions that makes her feel confident saying yes to the next thing. The target is someone exactly like her. She said, "That doesn't make me feel better." I said, "I know, but it's true." There was a follow-up from the SEC intake process several months later. I can't share the details of it, but I can say that the contact name Weston had provided, the one at the bank, the one that went to a personal cell, was already associated with at least one prior inquiry. Brooke's documentation was part of a larger file. She wasn't the only person who had received that prospectus. She may have been the only one who didn't wire the money. I've been thinking about what I want to leave you with, because I know a lot of people who watch these videos are people with savings. People who worked hard, spent carefully, made the good choices. And I want to say directly, that is exactly who these operations target. Not despite your judgment, but because of it. The red flags matter, but they show up after trust has already been built. So let me give you the flags that come before. The first is urgency. Any legitimate investment vehicle will survive your due diligence. If someone is telling you the window closes in 3 weeks, the purpose of the window is not to give you time, it's to take it away. The second is the guaranteed return. There is no such thing as a guaranteed return on a private investment instrument at yields that exceed what conventional markets offer. Guarantee is a legal term with specific meaning. When a fund uses it, ask them to show you the guarantor's balance sheet. The third is the favor language. I'll see what I can do for you. As a personal favor, I'll extend your deadline. That's not generosity, that's control. A real opportunity doesn't require someone to pull strings on your behalf to give you more time to think. The fourth is the custody question. Ask who holds the money once it's wired. Ask for the custodian's name. Then call the institution's main switchboard, not the number you were given, and ask if the contact name your advisor provided is an employee. That one question has ended a lot of bad conversations quickly. Brooke did not lose her savings. She did not lose her composure. She asked the right questions at the right time, and when she needed a direction, she called her old compass. I picked up on the first ring. I always will. I keep coming back to the brass compass sitting on my desk. It's been there for years, small, dented on one side from when my father dropped it on a concrete floor in 1987. I used to think the reason I kept it was sentiment. Now I think it's something else. What Weston built over 4 months was not an investment pitch. It was a relationship. He was patient and warm, and he showed up with the right bottle of wine at the right time. He learned what my daughter valued: her independence, her discipline, the quiet pride she took in having done things the right way for a long time. And he used those things as the architecture of the con. The target was never her money. The target was her confidence in her own judgment. Because once you shake that, once a person starts second-guessing the instincts that have served them well for 30 years, they become easier to move. That's what took me the longest to say out loud to her. Not the fraud part, the part about how it works on people who are careful. Brooke did something that night at the dinner table that I don't think she fully understood she was doing. She didn't panic. She didn't pull me aside and say something's wrong. She held herself together through an entire meal. Pot roast, good dishes, her mother's best effort at a normal Sunday, and she found a way to tell me without telling the room. That takes a kind of steadiness that can't be faked and can't be taught in a week. It's the product of years of practicing the thing where you feel fear and don't let it run you. That steadiness is what saved her savings. Not luck, not me. Her. I think about my friend in securities law who picked up the phone before 8 in the morning and called me the moment he found the copied paragraph. He didn't have to do that. He did it because he'd built a career on understanding exactly what those documents do to real people. Knowledge like that isn't neutral. When you have it, you have a responsibility to use it in the right direction. And then I think about Brooke's decision not to confront Weston, not to send the angry text, not to demand an explanation. She collected the documentation, submitted it to the right agency, and let the process do what it was designed to do. That took something harder than anger. It took the discipline to stay quiet when every instinct was telling her to say something. It took trusting that doing the right thing slowly was better than doing the satisfying thing fast. Integrity, in my experience, almost never announces itself. It shows up in the small choices. In the moment you decide not to wire the money even though you want to believe it's real. In the moment you call your father using a code name from childhood because you know he'll understand without you having to explain everything in front of someone who might be listening. I picked up on the first ring. That part was easy. The harder thing, the thing I hope I gave her somewhere along the way, was the compass itself. The ability to know when you're turned around and ask for direction without shame. To know that needing help isn't the same as losing. She still has every dollar she worked for. She still trusts herself, and the compass is still on my desk, pointed the same direction it always has.